Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
You are now listening to Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Every month, Cultural Survival brings you the latest news impacting indigenous peoples across the globe. This April edition features important stories from Europe, North, Central, South America, Africa, Asia, and beyond. News from USA. California will observe Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Day on May 5th, followed by a week of events at the state capitol starting May 6th. Hosted by the California Native American Legislative Caucus, activities include a blessings, a briefing on Public Law 280, a hearing, and a candlelight vigil. The Capitol Dome will be illuminated red on May 6th and 7th. ACR 39, designating May as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Awareness Month, will be presented on May 8th to highlight the crisis of violence against indigenous people. Staying in USA, New Mexico has introduced a tortoise alert system to aid in locating missing indigenous individuals. Governor Michelle Luzon Grisham signed the legislation on April 8th, making New Mexico the fourth state to implement such an alert. Modeled after Amber and Silver alerts, the system will notify cell phones, aiming for a faster, community-driven response to the crisis of missing and murdered indigenous people. Similarly, the Hopa Valley and Yurok tribes signed a landmark agreement on April 2nd, securing 50,000 acre-feet of Trinity River water from the Bureau of Reclamation's reservoir. This agreement, stemming from a 1955 federal law, acknowledges the tribe's water rights and aims to mitigate impact of the Trinity Dam. Leaders hailed the pact as a crucial step towards restoring the river and ensuring the tribe's future prosperity. Likewise, on March 15, the Trump administration reversed Biden's Executive Order 14112, impacting tribal self-governance. The 2023 order aimed to ease federal funding access for 574 tribes. Critics argue this reversal increases federal interferences, hindering tribal management of federal programs. This action follows Trump's prior rescission of 78 Biden orders. In the same way, the U.S. Senate unanimously passed a bipartisan resolution on April 7 commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, an act of a Congress that fundamentally changed federal Indian policy. This landmark 1975 legislation, championed by Senators Lisa Murkowski and Brian Satz, empowered tribes to manage federal programs like healthcare and education. Lawmakers emphasized the act's positive impact on tribal communities while stressing the need to safeguard its progress and continue supporting tribal self-governance. In Australia, the Natural History Museum in London has repatriated the remains of 36 Indigenous Australian ancestors to Australian representatives during a formal ceremony. This event marks the fourth return from the museum, contributing to the global total of over 1,775 remains returned, with more than 1,300 coming from UK institutions. 6 ancestors were handed over to representatives of the Wapabura, Wargeme, Uthathi, and Yadigana communities. The remaining 30 ancestors are now under the Australian government's stewardships to identify their custodians. Indigenous representatives emphasized the cultural responsibility of bringing these ancestors home for a dignified burial. They highlighted the significance of repatriation as a crucial step towards healing and reconciliation, aiming to restore the spiritual and cultural balance disrupted by past removals. In New Zealand, Indigenous leaders in New Zealand are raising serious concerns over the government's plans to legalize online casinos. citing a lack of consultation with vulnerable communities, the proposed auction of 15 licenses, and the absence of mandatory contributions to community support by winning bidders have sparked unease. Maori leaders including Rahui Papa warn of increased gambling dependency and detrimental impacts on families, particularly within Maori and Pasifika communities. The online safety iwi leaders group is urging a halt to the auction, demanding a comprehensive review before the February 2026 implementations. While Minister Brooke van Walden argues the reforms will enhance safety and generate revenue, critics highlight the lack of Treaty of Waitangi provisions and research into potential harm. Similarly, New Zealand's controversial Treaty Principles Bill, aiming to redefine the founding documents principles, was overwhelmingly defeated 112 by 11 in its second reading after widespread public outrage. The bill sparked massive protest and over 300,000 submissions, mostly opposing it. While the ACT party vowed to continue campaigning, the other parties celebrated its demise, citing potential harm to Maori and national unity. Now news from Africa, starting from South Africa. In surprising move, some members of the Khoisan people, South Africa's indigenous group, have called for a meeting with the former US President Donald Trump. They argue that indigenous people in the United States are in a worse situation than white Afrikaners in South Africa, drawing attention to their struggle for recognition, land and cultural preservation. The Khoisan are seeking international support and visibility, advocating for their rights in the face of historical marginalizations. They believe Trump's influence could help amplify their cause, and they are pushing for action on a global stage to address their issues. In Namibia, Namibia has made history by swearing in Lucia Witbooi as the country's vice president, making it the only African nation with both a female president and vice president. Witbooi, the 18th woman to assume such a role in Africa, has been a Namibia's National Assembly member since 2009. Her appointment marks a significant step in the continent's progress toward gender inclusivity in politics. The move reflects a broader shift toward empowering women and encouraging young girls to pursue leadership roles, reshaping Africa's political landscape and breaking historical gender barriers. It is not the first time there is a Witbooi in a leadership position in Namibia, as Hendrik Witbooi was a prominent leader and warrior of Nama people in what is now non-Namibia. He is best known for his role in leading his people during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, especially during German colonial rule. In Uganda, the Bennett community, located in Sevei region of Uganda, is facing serious challenges in accessing land for cultivation due to ongoing conflicts with the Uganda Wildlife Authority. Every planting season, Uganda Wildlife Authority rangers are accused of destroying crops just as they begin to grow, leaving the community vulnerable to hunger. Many Bennett families displaced from their land since 1993 and evicted from Mount Elgon National Park in 2008 now live in temporary camps without access to basic services like electricity and clean water. Despite legal recognitions of their rights to land, the government has failed to resolve the dispute, leaving the community struggling for survival. They are calling on the government to intervene and allow them to return to their land for farming to prevent further suffering. Now news from Asia, starting from Indonesia. Indonesia aims to become a key player in forestry carbon trading, but significant challenges arise from concerns about indigenous land rights and the risk of greenwashing. While a presidential regulation introduced in 2021 and a ministerial regulation in 2023 provides frameworks for carbon trading. The historical exclusion of indigenous communities from land recognition remains a major obstacle. The government is targeting $65 billion from carbon credits by 2028, supported by the recent launch of IDX Carbon. However, the absence of a strong policies could lead to displacement of indigenous peoples in the name of conservation. The long-awaited Indigenous Peoples Bill, expected to be introduced in 2025, could legally recognize ancestral lands, offering protections and fostering investor confidence in forest conservation projects. Clear land tenure is essential for fair negotiations and preventing exploitation in carbon initiatives. In Malaysia, Sarawak's recent decision to halt the issuance of provisional palm oil leases marks a significant step towards safeguarding indigenous communities and their ancestral forests. However, a new threat is emerging. Timber plantations are becoming the primary driver of deforestation, putting indigenous territories at risk. While the federal government has set limits on palm oil expansion and established sustainability standards, Sarawak's aggressive promotion of timber plantation, often involving the clearing of natural forests, presents a serious danger. More than 200,000 hectares of indigenous land overlap with these plantations. Environmental groups are advocating for a national cap on timber plantations and mandatory sustainability certification. Although Sarawak has mandated accreditation by 2024, the future of uncertified plantations remains uncertain. Focusing on using degraded land for plantations could strike a balance between economic development and forest preservation, while adhering to stricter international trade regulations, ultimately protecting both the environment and indigenous rights. Now, news from Americas. Starting from Mexico, indigenous communities from 13 municipalities in southeastern Chiapas are protesting the construction of San Cristobal Palenque Highway near the current residence of former President Manuel López Obrador. The Choctil, Chol, and Cheltal communities announced their opposition following a reported consultation on March 23, 2025. Which they claim was marred by irregularities and a lack of transparency, violating their constitutional right to free, prior, and informed participation. Furthermore, the communities allege receiving threats from engineers and government delegates who warned of a police intervention if construction is obstructed, causing widespread fear among residents. In Ecuador, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has ruled against Ecuador, finding the nation responsible for violating the rights of indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. This landmark decision, celebrated by the Guarani Nation, marks the first time the court has addressed the rights of these particularly vulnerable communities. The court concluded that Ecuador infringed upon fundamental rights, including the right to life and self-determination. Emphasizing the paramount importance of respecting their choice of isolation, the court mandated the Ecuador must actively prevent contact with these groups. This includes restricting state and private activities within their territories to safeguard their autonomy and well-being. In Bolivia, Bolivian authorities have expelled representatives of the self-proclaimed United States of Kailasa, a Hindu religious sect, after they were found to be defrauding indigenous communities. The group allegedly misled leaders of Baure, Sayubaba, and Ese-Iza nations, securing land leases for over a millennium through deceptive contracts. One such agreement with the Baure people involved a perpetual lease in exchange for a purported $60,000 monthly payment. An investigation by Mongabe Latam revealed the attempted land grab in the San Rafael municipality of Santa Cruz, leading to the intervention of immigration officials and the subsequent expulsion of the Kailasa emissaries. In Peru, dozens of One Piece community members marched in the Galili community along the Santiago River in Peru's Amazonas region on March 22, 2025, decrying the escalating intrusion of illegal gold mining within their ancestral lands. The 22 One Piece communities residing near the Ecuadorian border in a zone vulnerable to illicit activities face the dual threats of illegal mining and logging. In response, the One Piece government formed a Green Army, an indigenous guard that has taken direct action to expel illegal operators, unfortunately placing them at risk from hired assassins. The One Piece people are urgently calling for greater protection of their territory and end to these destructive illegal enterprises. Similarly, in Peru, members of various indigenous communities have blocked access to Glencore's major Antapashi copper mine in the Cusco region, a local leader reported. The protesters, representing 10 communities in Espinar province, are demanding a meeting with government mining officials to address their fears regarding the environmental impacts of a proposed $1.8 billion expansion. Community leader Flavia Hanco stated that road blockades have commenced due to unfulfilled agreements between the mining company and the communities of Huano Huano, Puini Quaracuyaco, and Pacopata. Antapaque ranks as Peru's 7th largest copper mine, situated in the world's 3rd largest copper producing nation. In Panama, indigenous communities impacted by a Chan 75 hydroelectric plant in Panama's Nagbay-Bugle region are demanding exclusion from compensation agreement negotiated without their proper representation. Meeting with foreign ministry authorities, community leaders who have protested since 2004 and received Inter-American Commission on Human Rights recognition asserted that the government has only engaged one petitioner. They voiced concerns over a significant loss of farmland and livestock due to the dam's construction, lamenting the lack of government and company attention to their plight. They are urging the full implementation of Inter-American Commission on Human Rights recommendations. Now, news from Argentina. Mapuche women in Argentina, Patagonia are denouncing what they describe as renewed wave of criminalization against their communities following devastating summer wildfires that consumed over 50,000 hectares. They accuse the government of Chubut, Rio Negro, and Neuquén, along with the judiciary, large economic groups, and national government, of unjustly targeting them. Violent raids on homes and communities, coinciding with insufficient state wildfire control attributed to environmental budget cuts, involved arbitrary arrest, beating, confiscations, and damage to community radio stations, sparking outrage over alleged excessive police force and unfounded accusations. In Ecuador, a significant crude oil spill on March 13, 2025, triggered by storm-induced landslide that ruptured in Sistema de Oleoducto Transecutoriano pipeline, has caused severe environmental damage in Esmeraldas. The ecological disaster is estimated to impact up to 150,000 residents, roughly 19% of the provincial population. The spill's severity threatens local vegetation and wildlife, crucial for livelihoods of Afro-Ecuadorian and Black communities. These communities, already faced state neglect, are bearing the brunt of this environmental catastrophe, highlighting issue of racism and structural abandonment in the region. In Brazil, thousands of indigenous people, including representatives from Australia and the Pacific Islands, convened in Brazil's capital for the annual Free Land Camp. The mobilization, uniting over 135 ethnic groups, urged the demarcation of indigenous lands and expansion of essential services. A joint manifesto signed by Amazon, Basin, and Oceania indigenous organizations highlighted their crucial role in combating climate change. Foreign diplomats, including Norway's ambassador, visited the camp, with France pledging €1 million to support indigenous-led conservation and development initiatives. Similarly, Brazil's Supreme Court withdrew its proposal to allow mining on indigenous territories following widespread criticism. Simultaneously, the Federal Attorney General's office presented a draft decree excluding mining but permitting indigenous-led tourism. Both drafts retain contentious clauses on compensating non-indigenous settlers, potentially hindering land demarcation. The proposals arose from a legal battle over the time frame thesis, which aimed to limit indigenous land claims. In Colombia has established 2.7 million acres territory in the Amazon rainforest to protect the uncontacted Yuri-Pase indigenous people. This unprecedented move aims to shield them from increasing threats from illegal mining and organized crimes. The protected zone located between the Caqueta and Putumayo rivers prohibits economic development and forced contact. Neighboring indigenous communities advocated for this landmark decision, highlighting the crucial role of indigenous leadership in safeguarding isolated groups and their biodiverse ancestral lands. That is all for this edition of Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Stay tuned for our next broadcast. For more information on the rights of indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, and X.